This CLearn tutorial focuses on the content components of iNACOL standards for quality online courses. Section A, Content, contains 13 standards organized by 4 strands: Academic Content Standards and Assessments, Course Overview and Introduction, Legal and Acceptable Use Policies, and Instructor Resources. Of the 13 standards, 8 are verified by review teams. The remainder are reviewed by CLearn Central. As publishers prepare a course for submission to CLearn, they provide evidence where we may verify each standard. In some cases, we also ask them to provide a short description about how the resource meets the standard. While this description is for your use, it is also published with the final review. With Standard A1, we only ask the publisher for the URL or location where we could verify the standard. This is why the Edit Citation box is grayed out. However, some standards are so general or holistic that CLearn reviewers should be able to verify it from their experiences during Content Standards review. Such is the case with Standard A2. We've not asked for any data, so the description and URL or location are empty. Standard A1, Goals and Objectives. While this criteria contains 2 sentences, we highlight the most important part of each standard in consideration, so you don't feel you have to find every detail contained within them. The key part of the criteria is that the goals and objectives state what students will know or be able to do. The consideration asks that we should be able to find the course goals and objectives, and that they're fairly obvious. Within the learning management system, course goals and objectives are present, explicitly stated, and can be easily found by students. The student's level of mastery is measured against each goal and objective. After reading the list of goals and objectives, students will understand what they will be learning throughout the course. Publishers provide a URL or location where we can find the course goals and objectives. In the first example, the publishers provided a URL so you can go directly to the evidence. In other cases, publishers will describe where the evidence may be found. In some cases, though, they'll also provide information that may be descriptive, but doesn't provide evidence. Such is the case here. Learn to spot which evidence will lead you to a source, and which is filler. The standard is not met if you can't find the goals and objectives. One possible partially met comment is, goals and objectives are present, but are not easily located. Standard A2, Standards Alignment, is a fairly easy standard to vet. The main part of the standard is that the course content and assignments are aligned with the content standards. The main part of the consideration states that the content and assignments for the core courses are explicitly and thoroughly aligned to the state's academic standards, frameworks, and assessments. Because you've already reviewed all the content standards for this course, you are aware whether a majority of the standards were met. Notice that we've not asked the publisher for any information to verify the standard. Only a particularly misaligned course receives a not met for this standard. In some cases, when a course fails to meet or partially met a large number of content standards, we'll add a partially met comment. A substantial number of content standards are either not met or are partially met. Standard A3, Rigor, Depth, and Breadth, is our first power standard. In Standard A3, we're asking if the course content and assignments are of sufficient rigor, depth, and breadth to teach the standards. The consideration informs us that when looking at the assignments, assessments, and instructional strategies, are they sufficiently broad, deep, and rigorous, such that successful students will have the knowledge and skills required by the standards? Because this is also a holistic standard, you should be able to determine its status from your experiences reviewing the content standards. For that reason, we've not asked the publisher for a description or URL. While a few CLearn reviewed courses have failed the standard because they primarily consisted of reading content, the majority of courses will either meet or partially meet Standard A3. Possible partially met comments include, some content or lessons contain insufficient depth or breadth. In order to be of sufficient rigor, depth, and breadth, some or most assignments require additional instruction, practice, and assessment. Course provides practice, but is lacking in development and assessment. Rigor, depth, and breadth is dependent upon teacher interaction. And while the course provides content and structure, increased rigor, depth is dependent upon classroom teacher in some units. Standard A4, Information Literacy, includes the adopted Model School Library Standards. Reference the Information Literacy video, created by Glenn Warren, regarding his advice for the standard. This pilot tutorial skips the video. Publishers have indicated which information literacy standards they believe their course meets. Your job is to check which standards you believe may be present. Remember, Glenn's advice is that if you see a model library standard, you should mark it as present. Standard A5, Learning Materials, addresses the resources that are available to students before the course begins. As our note states, we're not expecting a specific number, only the students have access to a variety of resources to help them prepare for the course. Publishers supply you with both a description and the location where you can find these resources, which can include technical information, plugins, tutorials, textbooks, orientations, or prerequisite information. For the standard to be fully met, you don't need to find all these things. We aren't looking for a specific number at this time. However, if very little is available, you'll include a partially met statement such as some learning resources are available before the course begins. The next strand, Course Overview and Introduction, contains 3 standards. Only A7 is vetted by site reviewers, though. Standard A6, Course Syllabus, asks if the course includes a clear and complete syllabus. Publishers provide a URL location where the syllabi information may be found. The review consideration expects that the syllabus contains at least the course objectives, as well as a variety of other information, including learning outcomes, assignments, time requirements, required materials, the grading policy, teacher, student, parent contact information, and the scope and sequence. While we don't expect all of these to be present in order for the standard to be fully met, many of these should be included. The syllabus should at least contain course objectives, an introduction, and some form of orientation in order to be partially met. The partially met comment is some syllabi information is missing. Standard A7, Course Requirements, addresses whether the course requirements are clearly stated and are consistent with course goals. The consideration asks that you determine if there's a time frame for participating, an approximate time for each activity, and expectations for communications. Because the course requirements should be among the other materials you've already reviewed, particularly the syllabus, the pre-course learning materials, and the course goals and objectives, we've not asked the publisher to provide a location or description. The course requirements may be found at the beginning of the course, but sometimes they're also embedded at the beginning of each unit or lesson. The 2 most common partially met comments are, most of the course requirements are consistent with course goals, or course requirements are consistent but are not clearly stated. Standard A8, Contact Information, addresses how students will be able to communicate with the course instructor or provider. The standard states that information is provided to students, parents, and mentors on how to communicate with the online instructor and course provider. The consideration adds that students should have access to content, availability, and information about how to reach the instructor via phone, email, or messaging. Publishers provide both a description and URL or location where we can confirm this standard. The guiding question is, what information is present for students? While we're not expecting every detail of the consideration, the standard would be marked not met if no information is available. Instructor contact information should be easy to find. If minimal contact information is provided, your partially met comment could read, "Some instructor contact information is available." The next strand, Legal and Acceptable Use Policies, contains 3 standards, one of which is verified by reviewers. Standard A9, Free of Bias or Advertising, is a power standard that is a mirror of CLearn's Social Content Review. Prior to reviewing the course standards, our reviewers indicated whether there were any social content problems within the course. This power standard essentially states that the course is free of bias or advertising. The consideration, customized for California reviews, references that the course is compliant with the State Board adopted standards for evaluating instructional materials for social content. Notice that publishers are not asked for a description or location. Instead, you'll reference your work with the social content to mark the standard as met or partially met. In some instances, you'll want to reference your comments in the social content review. However, the most common comments deal with outside web pages students access during the course. We treat differently those web pages that are supplemental to the course and those that are a required part of the lesson. If an outside website is a required activity and it has a social content problem, particularly advertising, you'll mark the standard as not met and the course will fail our review. However, most outside links are supplemental to the lessons. When students extend their work through outside web links, your most common partially met comment will be number 2. Please be aware that the resource may include links to internet sites which have not been reviewed by CLearn. Standard A10, Academic Integrity, is verified by CLearn Central. Here, we're looking for a variety of statements or documents that essentially present a code of conduct for students. The standard asks that expectations for academic integrity, use of copyrighted materials, plagiarism, and netiquette regarding lesson activities, discussions, and email communications are clearly stated. The consideration essentially repeats this. Publishers provide the URL or location where we can find documents related to academic integrity. While we don't expect all these things to be present to mark the standard as met, several should be present, including the school's plagiarism and copyright policies. For this reason, your partially met comment will either address missing components or state that the policies could be more prominently stated. Standard A11, verified by CLearn Central, deals only with the publisher's privacy policy. Is it present, and is it clearly stated? The consideration states that the policy is posted on the publisher's website or in the learning management system. Publishers provide the URL or location where we can verify the policies are in place. But there's no partially met comment for Standard A11. The final strand of Section A is instructor resources. Of the 2 standards, review teams vet only Standard A13. Standard A12, Instructor Resources, is verified by CLearn Central and asks if instructors are provided additional resources and notes to assist their teaching. These should be easily found in the learning management system. Publishers provide the URL or location where these additional resources may be found. Standard A12 partially encompasses other online course standards that ask if resources are available to instructors. However, to be met, we should find evidence that resources and notes that help them facilitate the course are present. The partially met comment is for use when you find few but not many instructor resources. Section A's final standard, A13, addresses whether teachers have access to assignment and assessment answers and explanations. This is not an expectation for students, although quality courses should also provide them to students. This power standard asks that assessment and assignment answers and explanations are included. The consideration essentially repeats this expectation. To assist you, publishers provide either a description or a location where we can find both the answers and explanations. While some courses provide both, it's not uncommon to find that teachers are provided the answers, but not the explanations. In addition, answers might be provided for the assessments, but not the assignments. Because of this, our partially met comment may be a variation of those we provided. This concludes our tutorial for Section A, Content.